Hello, everybody. Welcome to And Yet We Believe. We are glad to have you with us. As usual, we are recording live on Instagram, an Instagram Live, and then this episode will go out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the normal places that you get podcasts. So thanks for everybody who's joining on Instagram. We've got a really good topic for today.
Yeah, so the idea for this topic came from a different podcast I was listening to this week, as it was the Worlds Colliding in podcasts, where Susan and Cynthia from At Last She Said It were interviewed by Tim and Aubrey from Faith Matters. It was kind of amazing. But one thing that Cynthia said has stuck with me, and she was actually quoting President Hinckley, where he said, "I constantly hope and pray that if we err, we will err on the side of mercy." And I just love that thought, because we need it so badly right now. We need to err on the side of mercy.
Yep.
And there are a lot of ways that this can go. So let's jump in. Let's talk about, first of all, what is mercy?
Yeah, for sure. I think forgiveness is a part of mercy. But there's also, this is one of these things where we have to balance of, like, it doesn't mean being weak. It doesn't mean not having boundaries. It doesn't mean avoidance or permissiveness. Having mercy is quite a bit different than that.
Yeah, and when I think of mercy, forgiveness isn't necessarily the first thing that pops into my mind.
Okay.
For
me.
Yeah, I tend to think of compassion.
Nice.
Having compassion for people. And there is this power dynamic that shows up in mercy and forgiveness, where somebody who has power to punish someone is giving them mercy instead.
Right.
Giving them forgiveness, showing compassion. But I don't necessarily always see it that way. When I'm thinking about having mercy for a neighbor or, somebody else, maybe I tie it a bit to grace.
Okay.
Where I'm giving some sort of an allowance that maybe they don't deserve.
I like that. And I think there's also an element of not judging in there. And that goes along with grace, and that goes along with forgiveness, and that goes along with our topic, which is mercy on this. And so we talk a lot about grace. This is a topic that's kind of near and dear to both of us. And there's something that always happens when I talk about grace, online or whatever. There's always somebody who wants to say, like, but what's the limit, right? And they're saying, what if it's merciful to tell somebody they're wrong? And, okay, I'm not going to rule that out, like, as a thing. I don't think that's our job. For most of us, is to judge, is to tell people they're wrong. Maybe it is as a parent with our kids. And maybe there's something here for a judge in Israel, a bishop, or something like that. But I always think that's an interesting kind of knee-jerk reaction that I see when we talk about mercy or forgiveness or grace, is people's knee-jerk reaction to mercy being not mercy.
Right.
Or maybe justice in this case.
Right. And I hear it the most, you kind of talked about this, but with people who we vehemently disagree with.
Yep.
And we're like, we are not going to show them mercy because they are idiots. Like we have so much hate in our heart for somebody else or whatever they're doing, even their action or their behavior, that we will not allow them any amount of mercy or compassion. That goes 100% against what Jesus taught.
Absolutely. And I've heard this come up politically with people talking about, oh, yes, I agree that we should have grace and mercy for other people, except these people have gone too far.
Yeah.
The other political party has gone too far, and I no longer need to forgive them or have grace for them or treat them like human beings.
Right. And have they gone too far? Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
That is, we're not discounting behavior, and people need to be held accountable for certain behaviors. That is not what we're talking about.
Right.
When we don't have mercy for other people or compassion for other people or see their humanity, that is doing something inside of us.
Yeah.
That is a darkness that is eating us up inside.
Right.
That is doing no one any good, especially ourselves. Right? That's harmful, to keep all of that hate and animosity tied up inside of ourselves.
Right. So we're kind of piling a lot onto this concept of mercy. I want to keep piling on because I think human dignity is at the center of mercy. And I think mercy is recognizing and centering that human dignity in somebody else.
I love that.
And so that shows up in the political thing of like, oh, they are animals. You know, and they have gone way too far, and they're barely human at this point. And hopefully not a lot of people are saying that, but that's kind of the approach, right? Is like it's an us versus them. It's an othering kind of thing. But mercy means listening. I think mercy starts with listening, and that allows us to humanize the other person. And I think that's an act of mercy, is to rehumanize the other person.
Yeah, I love that. Share that quote that you've got there.
From Valerie Kaur?
Yes.
A favorite of ours, Valerie Kaur. Go read her book, See No Stranger. Changed our lives. But she says, deep listening is an act of surrender. We risk being changed by what we hear.
Yeah.
And this is such a dramatic thing, especially in this political arena. I'm going to keep dwelling on that. You know, are we ever willing to sit down with somebody who voted for the other guy, you know, or is on the other party, or, you know, wears the different color? Are we ever sitting down with them in a way where we're saying, I'm open enough that I might join your party. I might be affected by what you're saying to the extent that I am changed by it. Now that's probably the most dramatic example we can come up with.
Well, and I don't have the rest of the quote written down, so I'm just going to paraphrase, but she continues and says that when we listen to somebody that we disagree with, we're not giving credence to what they're saying, but we are acknowledging their humanity while keeping our humanity in key as well, you know, in check. And so that is so important, that just listening doesn't mean everything you're saying is right, and I agree with you.
Of course.
We do risk being changed if we are deeply listening, but also we are acknowledging their humanity and keeping ours visible and front of center as well.
Right. So it's a mutual humanization, them and us simultaneously. So conflict is what dehumanizes, and then mercy is what rehumanizes, gives people names and faces and stories when we're willing to listen.
So I have this quote from President Hinckley from 2008. It's a talk from 1990.
Whew.
Taking it back even farther.
Yeah, rolling it back.
It's called Blessed Are the Merciful. And in this quote, he is talking about the conflict that was going on in Northern Ireland at the time.
Okay.
It was very fraught time in Ireland.
Yeah.
But I think it's so applicable to what we're dealing with in our society right now. So he says, an outpouring of mercy on both sides would overcome the corrosive hatred that has existed and festered for so long. It is time for each side to act with greater compassion toward the other. I am confident that as surely as this happens, those who are merciful will find the mercy for which they hunger. I really appreciate that, given in 1990, where, you know, politically we were not anywhere near where we are right now in our country. But both sides need to have this outpouring of mercy and compassion, because that is what we want from the other side, right? That's what we want from people that we feel opposed to in any way, whether that's at church or politically or, you know, driving down the street, whatever it is. We want people to have mercy for us and to see us. And if we're not willing to extend that to somebody else, then we are just, like it says, it's corrosive. It's this corrosive hatred that is festering inside of us.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And again, it's not about agreeing with the other side, you know, especially in like a really dramatic, you know, war situation like this. It's about seeing the other side as human beings. It's about listening. It's about understanding. Another thing that Valerie Kaur talks about is understanding what's at stake for the other person. What is it that matters to them? And so that listening is not just listening so you can decide what you're going to say next, but listening to understand what matters to them, what's important to them as a human being.
Yeah, it's so important. When I'm thinking about this, giving mercy, extending mercy to other people, I naturally go to Jesus Christ. His whole ministry
Absolutely.
was showing mercy, showing compassion. I found a quote from Rachel Held Evans that said, Jesus did not simply die to save us from our sins. Jesus lived to save us from our sins. His life and teaching show us the way to liberation. And what did he teach while he was here? This is me saying this.
Yep.
This is me now. What did he teach while he was alive? He taught radical love, radical compassion, radical empathy, radical mercy.
Right.
That is who he was. And it is, let's talk about the examples. There's the woman caught in adultery. There's no reason, given the law, that he should have had compassion for her.
Right.
And yet he did. There's, all the scriptures in Matthew where he's saying, if somebody takes your coat, give him your cloak too. If he wants to walk a mile with you, go with him twain, go 2 miles.
Right.
If somebody hits you, slaps you on the cheek, turn the other cheek. That is a radical form of mercy that we can't really understand right now because I don't think we're willing to do it.
Yeah. Well, and he also, to what we were talking about a minute ago, Jesus Christ humanized people that had already been dehumanized by society.
Yeah.
We're talking about lepers. We're talking about groups that were called sinners. The woman taken in adultery. All of these people, the blind. He touched the leper. Which was like the ultimate like unclean thing to do. But what he saw was a human being who had leprosy, not a leper that was an outcast, needed to be on the fringes of society and that sort of a thing. So even in the day-to-day life of Jesus, we see him humanizing everybody around him. And man, that is a hard thing to do.
It's so hard. These stories from the scriptures are so unique, and they're like, we're never going to come across those exact circumstances, right?
Sure.
And so who is the woman caught in adultery in our lives that we need to show mercy to? What is that situation? What is a similar situation played out in modern day? Who is the leper now? Is that a homeless person? Is
immigrants?
Yeah, an immigrant. Like who are we needing to reach out and touch and humanize?
Right.
It's those two groups specifically.
Perfect.
Right?
We nailed it.
The other story that comes to mind is the Good Samaritan.
Sure.
And there's a speech from Martin Luther King. It's the last speech he gave called I have gone to the mountaintop. I feel like that is not correct, but that is what is in my mind. I have visited the mountaintop, something like that. Anyway, it's the speech he gave the night before he was assassinated. And he talks about the Good Samaritan story in there. And he kind of recounts the story. And then he says the first 2 men, as they were passing, they said, they asked themselves, if I stop to help this person, what's going to happen to me? Who's going to think poorly about me? Or what's going to happen if I touch this person? Or, whatever.
Right.
But the Samaritan, as he passed, he said, instead of what's going to happen to me, he said, if I don't stop, what's going to happen to him?
Ooh,
what's going to happen to this person?
That's so good.
And I think we can even push it a little farther and kind of go back to that what's going to happen to me question, but twist it of if I don't stop, what will happen inside of me?
Oh.
And that's what I was alluding to earlier, that when we keep this hostility or hate inside of us and we don't show compassion, we are chipping away at who we are inside. We're chipping away at the goodness, the godness inside of each one of us.
I'm just going to pause and just let that kind of hang in the air for a minute there. I love that. We talked about immigrants. We talked about homeless. We talked earlier about a power dynamic that exists in mercy, and I kind of want to go back to that, and then maybe we can talk about some practical, close to home examples too. But mercy is almost always one directional. It's going from the person in a position of power or position of privilege to the person who is on the margins or who does not have the power in that situation. And so, as a straight white man, the demographic that is privileged pretty much in every way that there is, I want to be really cognizant of that mercy is stewardship of power. And the more power you have, the more your mercy must protect the less powerful. The more responsibility you have to lift immigrants, the homeless, and then we start to talk about any group that's marginalized in our society or in the church, which includes LGBTQ, certainly, people of color. There's a number of groups that we could fit in there, but it's on us to look at what privilege and what power do we have and how can we extend mercy, because that's the only direction it can go. Like, it has to come from us.
Yeah. Sometimes the word power is itchy for me.
Okay.
And so I like to think of it as social capital too.
Oh, nice.
Of like, there are certain benefits that I have being out in society in the body that I am in.
Yes.
In an able-bodied, white person, that gives me a social capital, a freeness to move around in society. And so that's what you're talking about of, in this position, I am able to extend mercy to people. And that doesn't mean that no one can extend it to me and that I'm at the top or that you're at the top. Like, this is a moving dynamic all the time. But there are situations where we are asked to extend mercy to others.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about close to home examples.
So the first one that always will come up in my mind is going to be social media, political conversations on social media.
Okay.
That is where I see the most hate, the most refusal to extend mercy to other people. And I really feel like that's one of the places we can improve the most.
Yeah. And clearly on social media, something with shock value gets more views, gets more clicks. And I've been super tuned into this lately because our son recently got Instagram. And spending all this time, watching reels on Instagram, flipping through, and he's come across some political stuff.
Yeah, he follows a number of political people.
And so he's sent reels and been like, did you know about this? Or, is this true? Or whatever. And there's that level of like digital literacy of like, hey, you got to be able to recognize the shock jocks from the real news, because the really provocative stuff is the stuff that has no mercy. It's the stuff that says the other side is terrible, they're animals, they're trying to murder people, and all of these things. And hopefully that's not true. I think largely it's not. But the important thing that it doesn't do is recognize the opponent's side as human beings. Yeah.
One of the best books about this topic is Just Mercy from Bryan Stevenson.
Sure.
Right. And one of his powerful comments in his book, he says, the power of just mercy is that it belongs to the undeserving. It's when mercy is least expected that it is most potent.
Ooh, wow.
I really like that because, we're going into a political season right now. Not a huge one, but one. And they all seem big right now because everything is so fraught.
It kind of seems like it's been one big, long political season for like the last 10 years.
Maybe it's just because we're paying attention more.
Yeah, maybe so.
But there are people that I come across that I feel are undeserving of mercy because of their political views. And that's not okay for me to judge that. And I think what that boils down to, like you said earlier, is that I'm not seeing the humanity in other people. I don't think that posts that say like, if you did X, Y, and Z, then this is your fault, and these name calling and dehumanizing language of calling people animals or whatever it is, and this is coming from both sides. I don't think that is how you treat a human.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's when I need to extend mercy of saying like, okay, I need to not say those things about other people.
Yeah.
I need to see the humanity in the person that is saying that. See God's image in them.
Ooh, okay.
That's probably one of the hardest things. And,
Sure.
and I really think what this boils down to is the commandment to love our enemies.
Right.
Right? It's easy to love people that we like, that we agree with.
Right.
Right? It is really, really hard to love our enemies. And like we said earlier, maybe we need to say this every 10 seconds for new people that listen, jump on. We're not saying that this will excuse the things that they are doing.
Right.
Extending mercy does not excuse behavior.
Right.
But it is compassionate, and it sees their humanity while keeping our humanity there and alive inside of us.
It's wild to me that this teaching is still so subversive 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
Because what you said is exactly what Jesus said. He says, it hath been said, right? Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you to love your enemy. And 2,000 years later, we are no further along in that. And maybe we've regressed in that.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and it's exactly as provocative and almost controversial of a teaching as it would have been 2,000 years ago.
There's a great quote here, or comment on the Instagram that says, "The fool in the room is always the one who's cruel."
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. That's how you can see it, right?
Well, and the one being cruel certainly doesn't have claim on being Christ-like in that situation.
Yeah, not at all.
So let's go to maybe some other scenarios of someone who is in need of mercy.
Okay.
And I tried to pick some ones that were maybe less dramatic than the politics, but more common, closer to home, something that might actually be happening in someone's life. You know, whoever you are that are listening and watching. How about somebody leaving the church?
Yeah.
A friend, a spouse, even.
Mm-hmm. A family member in any way, a child, a sister, a brother, parent. Yeah.
Somebody leaving the church. And we've all, I think, probably seen the non-merciful way to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I've probably complained about it on this podcast before.
Yeah. People
saying, oh, well, they got offended. It's their fault.
Yeah. They're saying don't let the door hit you on the way out, sort
Essentially,
of thing. Like, they just want to sin. They just want to not follow Jesus anymore.
And there's almost, you're not welcome here.
Yeah.
Kind of vibe to it. If you're doing things differently than I am, then you're not welcome here. So then what does it mean to have mercy for the person who's leaving the church? What do you think?
Well, and that could go both ways. There's two sides of this. Having mercy for the person leaving the church and for the person that is shoving them out, right?
Boy, yeah.
So there's two sides that we can look at. I think when we're looking at the person leaving the church, we cannot make assumptions about them. Mm-hmm. Having compassion for somebody who is leaving the church, especially not even if they were born in the faith, but anyone that has dedicated their lives to this church that is a high demand religion, leaving the church is a huge decision.
It's a huge part of your identity.
Right. You're losing community, you're losing identity.
All of it.
Yeah, and whether you are happy to be losing those things or not, it is a huge, that's a huge change, a huge shift in your life. I was reading some comments today on a video on Instagram, and somebody was like, why can't you ex-Mormons just leave the church alone? And somebody made that comment. Some of us have been in the church for 40 years. You don't just leave the church like that. You have to take years and years and years to break this stuff down and then maybe leave it alone. But like, this is something that a lot of people relate to. And so you can't just turn around and not have it be in your life anymore. Yeah.
And so what do you have to do? You have to see him as a human being who's making decisions. They're deciding what's best for them in their life right now.
Mm-hmm. And it does not mean that they don't love Jesus.
Nope. It doesn't mean they want to sin. It doesn't mean they chose to be offended or something like that. Mm-hmm. And a great comment in the chat here, and also mercy for yourself. Not feeling like all is lost just because you don't agree with some teachings.
Totally.
That's a big step that a lot of people are going through. A lot of people that we interact with online, that doesn't mean leaving the church, but it does mean, some people use the word deconstructing. It does mean taken a good hard look at some of those things that you've believed or been a part of your entire life.
Yeah. And so if we go back to this original 2 scenario of the person leaving the church and the person maybe pushing them out or not being compassionate when they do leave, we've said it before, but understanding the stages of faith has been really huge for us to be able to extend mercy to different people who are approaching church in different ways.
It helps us understand that humanity and the reason why they're making the decisions or doing the things that they're doing.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't excuse the behavior. We need to not push people out. We need to not judge and make assumptions when people are doing things different than what we would. But that keeping their humanity in mind is going to be really important moving forward, because that keeps a soft heart in us.
Okay, let's jump to a different example, and I want to kind of turn the narrative on its head here. Let's take the scenario of a bishop who is causing harm. You know, maybe they're rigid. We've talked before on the podcast about sometimes you get a bishop or a local leader who feels like their job is to be a cop. And they're often actually, this is almost the exact opposite of what we were just talking about. Sometimes they're the person that's saying, you got to be all in or all out. And if you're not all in, then you need to be all out.
Yeah.
And so we've heard lots of stories about people having an issue with a bishop, and especially people that have moved to a later faith stage.
Yeah.
And they're talking to a bishop who's in stage 1, stage 2, does not understand where they're coming from. How do we have mercy?
Can I phone a friend? It's so hard. And again, recognizing the stage of faith is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
It's interesting because where I don't remember where I heard this, but it was in our discussion that we had the other night. Somebody was talking about a youth, a teenage girl, I think it was, that had gone to the bishop for a limited use recommend. And the bishop had heard from someone else that this woman was gay, that this young woman was gay. And so he denied her a recommend based on the word of somebody else. You know, she's sitting right there.
Not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. And this girl was shattered by it and went to the stake president, and he was like, oh, no, that's not how we do it. Here's your recommend, you're fine, you know.
Right.
And so this is a bishop who is unaware of what's going on and is almost purposely causing harm.
Right. Trying to be a cop.
Based on a misunderstanding, maybe. And so, you know, there has to be a lot of grace. There has to be... we just have to love. We have to find some way to love through it. That doesn't mean that we turn around and go to the bishop the next week and you know, confide everything in him. You know, like maybe we need to protect ourselves and set some boundaries. Like, I'm only going to meet with a counselor now, you know, something like that. But turning around and spreading all of this hate about the bishop, that's not going to help either.
I like that. And you mentioned if somebody's being harmed, the first priority is to protect the vulnerable. Protect the person that's being that harmed. And maybe that's you.
Right.
It may be somebody else. It may be you. So make sure you're in a safe situation.
Right.
And then this is where it gets so hard. This is where Jesus taught to love your enemies. This is where Jesus forgave the people who had just nailed him to the cross. Right. And you know, we're never saying to stay in an abusive situation or anything like that. Hopefully nobody is nailing you to anything.
Right.
But that doesn't change the need to still humanize that person. And, you know, being a bishop, such a wild thing. Nobody asked for it. And no bishop really gets trained particularly well. Sometimes that's very obvious.
Yeah. Definitely not in mental health sort of
not in mental
situations.
health, not in pastoral care. They're just not equipped to do that.
Yeah.
They're, you know, a lawyer or an insurance salesman or a car salesman or, you know, something like that. And they've been thrust in, and I'm not here to excuse the behavior of any bishop or local leader,
Right.
but I am here to say what we're talking about today is humanizing someone by showing them some mercy. And this is the reverse of what we talked about earlier, where this is coming from a position of vulnerability toward a position of influence, and having mercy that way. And boy, is that a tall order.
Yeah. So I'd love to go back to Brian Stevenson to Just
you bet.
Mercy. He says, there is a strength, a power even, in understanding brokenness, because embracing our brokenness creates a need and desire for mercy, and perhaps a corresponding need to show mercy. When you understand mercy, you learn things that are hard to learn otherwise. You see things you can't otherwise see. You hear things you can't otherwise hear. You begin to recognize the humanity that resides in each of us. So I think when I'm thinking about a bishop who is causing harm, saying things in like a really dumb way, you know, like just not aware, not conscious of what their words are saying or doing. When I realize that I too have made mistakes like that, and I have needed the mercy from people, I'm becoming aware of my brokenness. I am then able to see that brokenness in that bishop. The bishop maybe hasn't been trained in mental health. You know, maybe the bishop doesn't know anybody who has come out as LGBTQ and doesn't know how to deal with this situation.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's not excusing the behavior, but it is adding humanity into the situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm a huge proponent, and I probably will get this tattooed on my body someday, of Maya Angelou's quote, "When we know better, we do better." And so I can say, well, this bishop didn't know better, and I can help educate. I can help educate this bishop to help them do better next time. And I think that is how we extend mercy in these situations. It is holding him accountable. It's saying what you did hurt or harmed XYZ person. You know, this was not okay. Here's what you should do next time. Here's how we handle the situation better.
I like that. And you may be approaching the situation thinking, for what this bishop did, they don't deserve my mercy. And that's probably true, because none of us deserve mercy. None of us deserve the mercy that we're getting from God. None of us have done anything to deserve the atonement of Jesus Christ. Mercy is something that is given. It is never something that is deserved. And so I've got a quick quote here from Thomas Merton. And he says, "Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy."
Period.
And I think that's the essence of mercy, is recognizing someone else as a human being, as a fellow child of God, and relating to them on a human level, whether they deserve it or not.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
Should we end on this one quote from President Hinckley?
Yeah, let's
do. You
go.
have anything else you need to add today?
No, I think this has been great.
Okay. This is from that same talk from 1999. He says, "I plead for a stronger spirit of compassion in all of our relationships, a stronger element of mercy, for the promise is sure that if we are merciful, we shall obtain mercy." So maybe our homework for this week, can we extend homework? Find somebody that you can extend mercy to. You know, this could be looking back into conversations you've had in the past, hurts that you've had, that you've received at the hands of others.
Somebody that you judged.
Yeah.
For something.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that you got hurt. Maybe you hurt somebody.
Yes.
Reach out to somebody and try and build a bridge. Try and add a little compassion, a little mercy into the mix, and let's heal our communities.
Yeah, I think it's the only way.
Yep. All right. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I really loved this conversation.
This was really good. Yeah, thanks to everybody who joined us live and commented. We were so glad to have you, and we will see you next time.
See you later.